Welcome to another episode of the IBC Guys. It's just me again today. We're gonna jump right in. I got something kind of different today, and I'll kind of give you the context behind why I'm choosing to talk about this, and then we'll jump in. But you've likely already seen the title, called "Trauma Around Money." Um, so we'll talk about that. But before we get into that, the IBC Guys exist for three reasons. One is to get the information around infinite banking out there to everybody. So the hope is that you have the information in front of you to make an informed decision for your family. So if you decide to do it, great. If you don't decide to do it, great. We just want you to have the information. Two is to provide implementable and applicable examples. So today, I think we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people work through in terms of trauma around money. So we'll expand on that a little bit. Well, my hope is this is applicable, just to maybe change some mindsets a little bit. I'll share my own thoughts and stories around this. But the third reason then is to get it out to as many people as we can. So if you would share with your grandma, share with someone else that you know, maybe your bestie has trauma around money. I don't know, but if you want to share with them, my hope is my heart behind this episode is that this hits home a little bit and is an encouragement to a lot of people. That's my hope. Um, we have a phone number. I am infamously famous. Those are the same word, but I am infamous for not remembering the phone number, but it's 507-205-2284. I'm Dave at familybankingsolutions.com. Mike is Mike at familybankingsolutions.com. He'll be joining us again soon. But if you want to give him an email or me an email, we'll be happy to talk with you. And if you call that or text that phone number, one of us will answer it or text you back. All right. So the trauma around money. So this is a new book that's coming out. So I thought it appropriate to talk about it, but more than the fact that it's a new book, that's not that big of a deal. There's lots of books coming out all the time. But when I have conversations with people around IBC or the infinite banking concept, there's often shame there. That's the emotion that I would wrap around what comes through. I don't know enough to talk about this with you, Dave. I've made some mistakes. I've had some bad experiences. Um, my family didn't have any money growing up. I really don't know what to do. So there's a lot of shame around it. So just to quickly define shame, it means you don't feel like you're good enough or cut out to work with money. So my hope today is to get that out. I'm making big hand gestures if you're working. Wow, you hit the microphone. If you're looking on YouTube, I'm making big hand gestures. Get that out of your brain. IBC is for anybody and any amount of money. So I should say this, it's not any amount of money. There's a lowest amount of coverage that you can get, but depending on your health, your age, and your gender, that is dependent on the individual. So there's no one set number that you have to start with. But again, we can do really, really low numbers. So 99% of any dollar amount, we'll say, will work. So I want you, if you're feeling that way and listening to this podcast, you feel like you don't know enough or don't have enough money, get it out of your brain. Okay, that's a charge from Davey P here. So you don't have to listen to it, but I'm going to ask that you do that. But jumping back to the book, it's titled "The Trauma of Money: Mapping Compassionate Pathways to Healing Financial Wounds and Disempowering Shame." That is a super fancy title. So something a little bit about me. I love getting into peer reviewed journals and looking at studies of the social sciences. I say social studies, that has a different connotation going through elementary school, but the studies of social sciences. So how did they do their study? What instrument do they use to set it up? How are their statistics done? How is it statistically significant? I enjoy all that stuff, which makes me really, really weird. So I did the background on this. It is fairly new, so there's not a lot of information. But the information I did gather in terms of peer-reviewed journals and stuff says this is rather legit, this new book that's coming out. So I think it's a heavier read. So I'm going to try and give a synopsis of it because this is not meant to be a heavy podcast. But again, tying it back to IBC, the whole genesis of this thought is as I talk to people about IBC, they struggle with feeling up to it or worthy enough, whatever adjective you want to throw in there. And all that's a bunch of baloney. It's a bunch of garbage. I have struggled with shame in certain areas of my life, so I certainly can empathize. I would even say maybe starting off in the business world. And do I think I've arrived? Absolutely not. Have I learned a lot? Absolutely. So I feel a little more confident in it. But to those that may not, I would encourage you to just keep learning. That's my encouragement. Get it out of your brain that you're not good enough. Everybody starts somewhere, and I think Mike shared the same sentiment as he's given his story as well. He spent 6 months, day and night, talking about or reading through and learning about IBC before he even jumped into it. And that doesn't include all the other business ventures he has and does still. So going back to the book, there's a lot of good stuff in it. Again, I have not read it fully. So I'm trying to give a synopsis that fits into a 30 to 40-minute podcast. But some key concepts and themes. So the first one off the bat is that trauma shapes how people believe about or what people believe about money and their behaviors around money. So that's essentially, I mean, it's not hard to tell from the title of the book that that's the premise of what's being discussed. So just a quick statement from it. Trauma isn't what happened externally, but how it gets stored in narratives, your nervous system, and in a relationship, and then how money influences financial behaviors often unconsciously. So I think that can resonate with a lot of people. So the trauma, your background, your story, your backstory, and how it influences your understanding or your thinking of money moving forward. So trauma shapes a lot of money beliefs and behaviors. So then it goes on in the next little bit, the different sources of financial trauma. So they're relational. So your family messages, your parent modeling, your childhood experience, and your childhood experiences around money. There's also generational or intergenerational trauma that exists there. So transmitting beliefs and misbeliefs, inherited shame, or a scarcity mindset. I think that can resonate with a lot of people. I know I've had some of that in my life and in different ways. And then systemic and societal trauma. So economic injustice, inequality, discrimination, and scarcity as a structural condition. So the idea or the mindset that there's never enough in terms of a scarcity of structural condition. So let's talk about those real quick. Relational. And I'll expand on this a little bit because it goes into a 6-phase method and how to get out of it. Again, I'm going to say this maybe several times. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just relaying. I'm getting give all the credit to Carpenter, who wrote this book. So I don't know if I mentioned that. Carpenter is the author. Um, their book, I just found it very fascinating in terms of the context of discussions I have with people. But going back to the different sources of financial trauma, relational. So, what does that look like as you were growing up? The family messaging. What did your parents convey to you about money? What do they directly teach you, or what do they indirectly teach you? So, I think that scarcity mindset comes from a lot of that in unconsciously from your parents. Is there enough? Are we going to make ends meet? Sometimes that's an actual reality. Sometimes it's not an actual reality. But what does that look like? So the family messaging, the parent modeling, again, how did your parents use that? How did you witness them use their money as they're growing up? And then childhood experiences around money. And then generational and intergenerational trauma. So transmitting beliefs and misbeliefs. So what's actually true? What's not true? Um, Inherited shame or a scarcity mindset. So, yeah, getting into this a little bit in my life, transmitting beliefs. Um, my beliefs have changed since I started a business. We'll put it that way. Finding new ways to leverage money. There's a certain well-known financial expert, we'll call him, that he walks people through getting out of debt. So you probably know who I'm talking about. So I was raised under that mindset, and I 100% agree with everything that said in terms of getting out of debt. But where I think that mindset lacks is okay, if I'm out of debt, now what? What do I do? And maybe most of America is so in debt that that's what they need to do. But I would also argue there's other ways to make money than a W-2 or a single income. So what are we doing to leverage money? And I would argue IBC is one of those ways. If you can put money into a policy, and have it make money and then go spend it as you would anyway. That is leveraging money you're already going to spend that you would never see in your family again, but it stays in the ledger, making you a dividends and interest and internal rate of return. So that's an IBC is an example of that. So I'm sharing this because that is a passed down, a generational, I wouldn't call it trauma. That's a strong word. And again, I don't know the definition of trauma. Maybe influence is a better word for what I'm trying to do here today. But it was a transmitted belief. Do not go in debt. Pay all your bills on time, and I'm all for paying your bills on time. But I have debt. I mean, I've shared many times on here. I put money in my policy and I borrow a cash value loan and go put it in my business. So it's not really debt in the sense that I owe a bank anything. I'm the bank, but I have debt. And on paper, I need to pay that money back. Maybe it can be settled by my death benefit, but if I want to make sure my policy is as efficient as possible, I'd pay that money back. So I'm leveraging that debt though to make a lot more money in my land business than it would sitting there making just an internal rate of return, or if I just invested it in the stock market. So my beliefs, I say all this, my beliefs have changed. So that's an example of my um, generational beliefs having been inherited. A lot of shame comes from maybe parents or in-laws, if that does exist, or there's a million ways. I was talking with somebody about IBC, and it was a discussion the question that was sent to me was, well, do I do this or do I do this? So my initial response was, there's a million different ways to do all this stuff, a million. And then I went into the detail of, I would ask that you don't think of IBC as mutually exclusive. It's one or the other. It's IBC and the other thing. Run through your policy and then go do with it what you want. In this case, it was what was it? It was shorting stocks or something crazy. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it's yeah. I don't exactly remember, and I apologize for that. But the point is, run the money through the policy first, and then go do what you were going to do with it anyway. So the idea behind it is we need to continually readjust and understand that there's a million ways to go about doing this stuff. And if you like stock, my dad does very well in the stock market, very well. I know very, very little about stock market. That's how he made his money. And I respect that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I've chosen a different path, but that stock market is a very, very viable way to generate wealth. I would argue there's some downsides that I don't like in terms of capital gains taxes, in terms of in my opinion, the the return on it over a long period of time is not as great as I could get someplace else. But again, if you do it correctly and you drip those dividends and you do all those different things, stock market can be a great way to make money. Excuse me. So I got on this idea because there's sometimes shame around it. There's a million different ways to do these things. So IBC is not the end all be all. It is not. It is not an investment. It is a way to monetize money you're going to spend anyway. So it's a concept in theory, and then we leverage it through a whole life policy to again make money on money you're going to spend anyway. But take it, run it through your policy, and then go use it as you would anyway. So again, I got into shame because that person contacted me and it was, I don't know what to do. So my response was, that's a great option. Um, if you choose to do it, go for it, but run it through your policy first. So again, not necessarily talking about IBC today, but kind of the trauma around money. And then the scarcity mindset. This is a tough one because there always seems like, especially when you're running a business, there always seems like there's not enough. My wife and I work hard to always try and find the positive. What went well this month? There were some things that were kind of stinky. What went well this month? I keep landing on I'm not working a W-2 job anymore. That's a beautiful thing. I'm recording this podcast in the middle of the day in my hat in a t-shirt sitting at my desk. That's a pretty cool thing. So there's a lot of good that comes. Sometimes it is warranted. Like I don't have enough. And my hope is you have a community, either a church or a group that you can reach out to. If that's something you need, talking through, that would take some humbleness for sure. But I'd be happy to do that with you. I know that's maybe a broad offer, some chucklehead that's talking on a podcast. But my heart is one that wants to serve Jesus, and if that's something I can help you do in terms of getting connected with a local church or something that I can do to get you help, I would love to be able to do that. Um, so I say that the scarcity mindset is a tough one. When all you see on Facebook and Instagram are people flying jets and wearing their Rolexes and driving whatever car, it's hard to get away from that. And I would argue that's a bunch of garbage too. I want to use a stronger word there, but I will refrain. This is a family friendly podcast. It's a bunch of malarkey. People just flaunting. I tell my daughter, Instagram's good for three things. Excuse me. It's good for bragging about where you've been. It's good for bragging about who you're with. It's bragging about what you have. That's it. That's what Instagram's good for. Now, if you're an Instagram person, I understand I'm on Instagram too. There's a lot of marketing power that exists there. But the majority of what comes through one's feed for those dopamine hits, and I've done a little research on this too, by no means an expert, but done a little research. But those dopamine hits usually come from something you desire, you want. And those fast cars, the big houses, the giant boats, all those things, come uh, allow for those dopamine hits, and that's what gets people looking and clicking, and that's what Instagram's going to throw in front of your face. So, scarcity mindset, trying to get out of that's tough in our society, especially in America, but it's something that needs to be done. And then finally, the systemic and social economic trauma that exists there. So, the economic injustice. That's absolutely a thing. Again, I'm not going to feign being an expert on this, so I'm not going to go into that. You can form your own thoughts on that one. I'm just reading again a synopsis of what this book is, or some key points that I picked out. But discrimination and then scarcity as a structural condition. I want to talk about this last one a little bit. In my opinion, not necessarily the scarcity, but I want to jump on the structural condition. Banks and qualified plans and things like that are all built to have you work within their system. And IBC works to break you out of that. I was talking again with my dad. He's got a significant amount of money coming his way. He's over that 59 and a half mark for his qualified plans, but he's doing well enough that he's not taking any withdrawals. He's having that money continue to grow. But what chaps my rear end is that they are going to start making him withdraw that money. He has to do it. Otherwise, it gets penalized and just taken from him anyway. Well, why do they want him to withdraw it? They want the taxes on it. They want to get the money as he withdraws it. They want the taxes. And I say taxes, the government wants the taxes. So he can't let that thing sit there and grow. He has to take the money out and then either spend it or figure out something else to do with it. So, but all that say, up until that point in his qualified plan, he couldn't spend it until 59 and a half. Then he has a window. I forget, it's like 70, 70 and a half, maybe 71. He has a short window to be able to withdraw or either withdraw or start withdrawing or not withdraw. He gets to choose. But then once he hits that threshold of being old enough, he has to start withdrawing or he gets penalized for it. That's all part of the system that was created to have you work as a cog in what they created. IBC, I would argue, helps you break out of that. But I get in that tangent, the scarcity as a structural condition. My dad does not have the control, liquidity, and usage that I have in my policies. Anybody with a qualified plan, I keep saying my dad. I'm not trying to harp on him. These are just fun discussions that he and I have. And again, he's done very well. But the anybody with a qualified plan, the scarcity mindset, oh, I have to donate, the max amount to my 401k this year. Well, then you don't get to use that money to do what you need to do, or have it go make more money. And one would argue it's going to grow. I understand that, but you can put it to work in much better ways, in my opinion, and have it grow further. In IBC, I get to put it on the ledger, make me my internal rate of return, dividends, and interest, and then go use it. And again, like my land business, and make a bunch more money that way too. I can't do that in a 401k. I'm stuck with what I got in terms of my mutual funds or whatever, maybe tier one assets they have invested in that. And there's the volatility that exists there too. In IBC, there's not. So I'm getting on the tangent of IBC. Again, that's what the podcast is about. But the goal of this episode is talking through the trauma of money. So I kind of talked about all that. Maybe just give more of my thoughts. I am not an expert. I'm reading what Chapman brought to the table in their book. But the next section, it talks about those things specifically. So shame around money is common. This is another uh, part of the book that I just pulled out. So shame around money is common. People often believe they are quote unquote bad with money or quote unquote undeserving. This shame shapes behavior. That I don't know if I could have written a better couple sentences to describe the discussions I have with a lot of people that I discuss IBC with. Excuse me. Even if it's in passing, hey Dave, what do you do? I work in private banking, working with infinite banking solution. Well, what's that? And then we get down the road, and oftentimes it's a hard stop, or their eyes glaze over. And as I get to the root, if I get a chance to talk to them a little bit further in that context right then and there, or have a discussion later on down the road, it's often I don't know enough, or that's nothing we can do, or we don't have any money to do that. It's that scarcity mindset, um, or the shame that exists there, and that shame shapes the behavior in terms of what people do with money. The next thing is scarcity isn't just a lack of resource, but sometimes this is beautifully said. Scarcity isn't just a lack of resources, but sometimes it's a lack of belief, it's a fear, it's an insecurity, or it's comparison. Oh, baby. All those things I have lived and experienced in terms of my journey, in business and in money. I'm gonna read that again. Scarcity isn't just a lack of resources, but sometimes it's a lack of belief, it's a fear, it's an insecurity, or it's a comparison. So let's just start with the last one because it's the last one I read. Comparison is the thief of all joy. I'm sure you've heard that before. If not, I'll say it again. Comparison is the thief of all joy. There are people who know IBC much better than I do. There are people with land businesses that are much bigger than I have. There are people in my immediate family that have significantly amount more money than I do. But I only realize that when I start comparing. So when I'm thankful and I'm grateful, and I think there's studies that have just come out too. I don't have them to quote, so this is just anecdotal evidence from Dave right now. But there's studies out there to show that you cannot have anxiety around anything, money or anything, as long as your brain is being thankful in those moments. Grateful is, I think, the word they use. Grateful in those moments. I would kind of parallel that to comparison. If you're grateful for what you have, it's really hard to be anxious or covet what others have. So that's again food for thought. Don't quote me on that study, but I'm pretty sure those have just come out, and it's something to think about. But the lack of belief, I don't think I'm good enough to do that. That I would say is directly tied to the first one, shame. It's not true. It's not true. I just point blank tell you straight up, it's not true. So if that's something you're struggling through, you and I can have a counseling session. I'll just maybe I'll say I'll let you talk and it's not true. I'll let you talk and say it's not true. I don't know. I don't know if that would be a benefit, but everyone is capable of doing that. And I maybe getting at the desire that Mike and I have in doing this thing. We want people to not only believe that and have an understanding in their heads, but have a belief in their hearts that this is for them as well. The next thing is fear. I understand that. Again, I use the term chucklehead. I am a chucklehead. Um, I've made a lot of mistakes. What I can tell you is I definitely have a desire and the knowledge to help people with IBC. So if I can do that, there's fear around contacting a guy you've never met. Hopefully, if you've met me, there's no fear around that. If you have not met me, I can absolutely understand that fear. But like I said, if it's not me, let's get you in touch with someone else. I just want you to have an IBC policy. Um, whether it's a female you want to talk to or someone of an ethnic background, we got the gamut, and there's a lot of wonderful people that do IBC and can explain the benefits probably better than I can. So let's get you in touch, but fear should not hold you back. Insecurity, along the same lines, I'm not good enough. Well, again, let's tie it back to shame. You are good enough. I don't know if I've said it that way. You are. So please get the insecurity out. And I know that just saying, hey, just get it out doesn't work. I've lived that. But if I can plant that seed of encouragement and have it grow in your heart a little bit, that's what I want to do. That's my goal. Please don't be insecure about giving us a call or asking us about it. The shame or trauma around money should not inhibit you from doing that. All right. Lastly, another point that came out of the book here is that narratives or money narratives, stories that we tell ourselves, that's how it's defined. Narratives are very powerful. They may not be true, but they guide our decisions. And changing those narratives is central to getting past your trauma. Oh, baby, that's good. So, narratives, stories we tell ourselves are powerful. They may not be true, but they guide decisions, and changing those narratives is essential to getting past the trauma. So, I don't know if I need to talk about that anymore. I mean, I just articulated it, verbalized it. I don't let that one sink in a little bit. If you're telling yourself one thing, it goes back to the old saying, just popped in my head. If you're telling yourself you can or you're telling yourself you can't, you're correct. I don't know who said that. Um, you can tell me, write in and let me know. I didn't prepare that, just popped in my head. But I think that's along the same lines of what Chapman is getting at here. Whatever narrative you're telling yourself around money, that's true. So if you're telling yourself that you don't know enough, let's change that. You are highly capable and perfectly capable of changing that. Let's do it together. I got a whole bunch of books back here. A lot of those are just fiction books. The bottom row is all business books. I don't know if you can see them. But I got tons of books to suggest. Don't take my word for it. Take somebody else's word for it. But I'd be happy to point you in the correct direction that I believe would help change mindsets that way. All right. Jumping in. I guess we've already jumped in. Jumping down. I wrote down 6 things. If I can get my mouse to work, holy moly. Let's do it on the computer. 6 things that kind of need to be worked through. And this is what Chapman talks about to get past trauma. And then it goes through and how to do it all. So I'm not gonna try and act like I wrote the book or know all this stuff. But there's a 6 phase model that they go into. So I'm just gonna read them and talk about them how they have shown up in my personal life. So generational, intergenerational trauma. How do you get past that? So this phase explores how financial trauma and beliefs about money can be passed down through families. So again, I apologize. I'm not trying to tell you how to get past that. You're gonna have to buy the book if you want to read through that. I wanted to talk about how these have shown up in my life. So I kind of did a little bit already, the generation, intergenerational trauma. This phase explores how financial trauma and beliefs about money can be passed down through families. Again, I was raised on a certain financial advisor that says get rid of all debt, and there's steps to go through and do that. Um, I personally have not followed that. I've kind of broken away from that. And I'm not saying that is wrong. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is I've chosen a different path. But the original topic or the original mindset, I should say, and how to use money was passed down generationally. So that's an example of how it showed up in my life. The next one is relational trauma. So, number 2, this addresses how relationships, both personal and societal, can cause financial harm or unhealthy money habits. So, I kind of had a funny one for this one. Um, I have my love language is gift giving. That's my love language. So, if Mike were on, he gets mad at me because I'm always finding stuff. I think I've talked about, I found some like camouflage Jordan ones. I like Jordans. I was so excited, Mike. I'm gonna get these for you. He's like, I will if you can get them for me, I will never wear them, Dave. It'd be a waste of money. And that's just how Mike is. But he's lovingly saying, don't buy it. So I have to get creative in what I get him. Um, but I like to give gifts. So I say that because it's very difficult to tell my wife no when she wants something. That is maybe a relational trauma. I don't know if that's the best use of money. I would argue that showing your wife that you love her, spoiling her, treating her like a princess, however you want to say it, is a good thing. But sometimes do we buy things that maybe we didn't budget for or don't need? Absolutely. So relational trauma, again, trauma is a strong word, maybe relational influence. But that's an example in my own life how that manifests. Societal trauma. So this examines the impact of societal messaging and events such as recessions or shifts in the economy or financial behavior and stress. So I wrote down like losing a business. I already talked about Instagram, Facebook. I think that fits there. What does society tell me if I'm not good enough if I don't have these things. And again, I would argue the people that are showing that they have those things are full of poopy. Um, again, family friendly show. They don't actually have those things. True wealth is often quiet, is maybe what I would say. If they're flaunting it and putting it on Instagram, there's different things. So that's my opinion. You can disagree with that, but I do think that causes some societal trauma when people are doom scrolling through Instagram. It's tough not to be influenced by that. Systemic injustice. So this involves recognizing how systemic factors like oppression and discrimination create financial inequality and trauma for marginalized communities. I feel like this is a bigger topic than I'm going to go into. I am not an expert in that. I feel like that could be, well, let Chapman do that. I feel like that can be a touchy subject, and I am certainly unqualified to dive into it. One thing that does come to mind, we used to live in Florida, and all over is a blue and yellow company called Amscot. And Amscot was their main business model was to give early payday loans. And uh, if you work for Amscot, I don't know what to tell you. It's my opinion that they're robbing people, giving them giant interest rates and things like that. And not just Amscot. Hopefully Amscot doesn't come back at me. But any like payday lender charging, 45% interest and things like that. That to me is a systemic injustice. Oftentimes people need the money before they have it for very good reasons. And their only source is to do a payday loan. So they get money before they get paid, and then they're charged an interest rate that just takes more of it out from their paycheck. It's tough. So maybe that's an example of systemic injustice. The banking system, fractional reserve banking, rules around qualified plans, I put that in there. Maybe that's less predatory. Um, but that's what comes to my mind for systemic injustice, but I am not the expert again. Next one's law of nature. I don't know if this is a nature versus nurture kind of thing, but it says the aspect considers how financial systems often operate in opposition to natural cycles and human needs that create stress. Again, you're gonna have to read it. Chapman's gonna go through that. But that was the fifth one, and then finally, this is what Mike and I work to we work to improve it, and it's why the IBC guys exist. Is financial literacy. This focuses on equipping people with practical financial knowledge to help them navigate their finances in a way that aligns with their healing. So I think IBC fits that perfectly. I actually, someone sent me, I've seen it, who knows how many times, but someone sent me a video of, again, a prominent financial expert, quote unquote, talking about IBC and saying how it's a scam. Gets me fired up. I would love to talk to you or really to this person about that. What I do find it surprising, I'll just lay this out, is there is nothing on the internet that has this person who disparages, describes IBC. There's nothing out there with him sitting down with an IBC expert and having a discussion. All that's out there are ding dongs that get mad and call into their show and they start yelling at each other, but there's nothing in terms of this expert going and having a knowledgeable debate about both topics. I have not found that. If you found that, let me know. You can send it to me. But I say all that because financial literacy is important. I want people to know. And there's a million different things. Our financial literacy, our education focuses around IBC. But Mike, much more so than me, Mike is very, very knowledgeable in a lot of different areas. So he's helped. I've witnessed him help a lot of different people with a lot of different things, not just IBC. So I'm sure he'd be happy to do that with you too. But to create financial literacy is another way to kind of talk through how trauma exists, and then maybe the ideology, the basis, and how to get past. You have to get past each one of those six things to get healing. Is the premise that Chapman came up with. So again, read the book. It does go into then tools and practical steps, modalities and practices. What can you actually do? What can you put into practice? Like addictions in there, mindfulness, if you're familiar with that. That's practiced in a lot of public schools for helping calm emotional stuff, cognitive behavior therapy. So there's different things in there. Again, I'm not going to go into it for the podcast, but I'm going to read one last thing in terms of the key takeaway. So true financial literacy and healing often require going beyond how to budget, save, and invest, and instead it addresses the emotional, relational, and generational stories behind money. So I'm going to say that again, the key takeaway of the book. True financial literacy and healing. So I would say healing right there is the important word. Often require going beyond just how to budget, save, and invest. And instead, one needs to address the emotional, relational, and generational stories that exist behind money. So that's it's well said. So if you want the book, again, Chapman, the full title is The Trauma of Money: Mapping Compassionate Pathways to Healing Financial Wounds and Disempowering Shame. So by no means am I trying to plagiarize this. The book is good. I scratched the surface on the book, so please go purchase it. I think it just came out this month, so it's fairly new. So if that's of interest to you, I'd be happy to send you a link that I found it on. But I just thought, in terms of taking these calls and talking with people, I thought it would be a good discussion to have an expert in the matter, Chapman, not me, talk through it a little bit, and then hopefully I can just be a microphone, maybe literally and metaphorically. I don't know, but a microphone for it's okay. A lot of people have shame. A lot of people have trauma around money, understandably so. Tried to give a few examples in my own life. But IBC can help reverse a lot of that and maybe talking through it in that specific context. What can this do for me in these areas rather than just dollars and cents budgeting? What is the internal rate of return? I don't want a number, Dave. I want to talk through how to get past this mental block that I have. Hopefully, this was a stepping stool to do that. Buy the book, give Mike or I a call. We'll talk through that because we've lived it. We've done it. We've done it. And I'm not all the way there. Mike's further along than I am because he's 1,000 years old. Write him. Tell him I said it. I tell him that a lot, and he just rolls his eyes at me. But I say all that because he's lived a lot of life and has spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff and is very knowledgeable in how to identify what's going on and help people get past it. So hopefully that's a help. That's a little out of my comfort zone, just to be transparent. But my hope is that it maybe struck a nerve in your heart. Do you have nerves in your heart? I guess you do, don't you? But struck something in your soul, maybe. Made you think a little bit. Um, and again, my goal is to not act like I am fully knowledgeable in this area. My goal was to just kind of bring an expert to the table because it's something I've experienced in talking with people on the phone over the course of the time I've done this. All right, IBC guys, we love when people write in and call. We do have a phone number, 507-205-2284. I'm Dave at FamilyBankingSolutions.com. Mike is Mike at FamilyBankingSolutions.com. The show notes are all of our socials. You're welcome to try and get a contact with us there. But yeah, again, my hope was that this just was an encouragement. Maybe that's the bottom line. My hope is an encouragement. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate the time you took to listen and looking forward to catching you on the next.